Go on expanding that light. Filling the entire planet and beyond, all smiling with natural joy, universal compassion and empathy. Feel that intelligence naturally coming to you, that wisdom. I'm going to ask you to chant with me 3 ohms, and as I do that, and as we all do that, feel the vibration of that ohm spreading out with that light, filling all the inhabitants of this world with that perfection and that beauty and peace. Peace, bliss, Amen. Scripture reading this evening comes from St. Matthew, chapter 6, beginning with verse 6. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. But when you pray, use not vain repetitions, as the heathens do, for they think they shall be heard for their much speaking. Be not therefore like unto them, for your Father knoweth what things you have need of, before you ask it. After this manner therefore pray ye. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you forgive not men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. Of course, we've had the recent tragedy that's happened in New York and Washington, D.C. And in this last week, we've had many interesting discussions about forgiveness and fulfillment of Dharma, right action, how those things work together, as well as prayer. When somebody does something that goes against our nature, goes against our interest, the human reaction is to repulse that, is to push it away. And one of the ways that we have to do that is to get angry with people, to get angry at situations. We can feel hurt about things that happen to us. And these are normal human reactions. Forgiveness, in the way that I think about it, means letting go. It means to let go of what we're holding on to. If you have a certain emotion and it runs through you and out of you, and you let it go, then you're not holding on to anything. That's what you might call honest human reaction or emotion. But if you nurse a grudge, if you nurse some hurt, if you continue to feed that within yourself, then that's where forgiveness really comes in. And if we find ourselves holding on to something, for instance, when we have an action that happened in New York and a plane crashes deliberately into a building, so many people's lives are destroyed, hurt, disrupted, and the reverberations go out. We've all felt the effects of this. We've all felt the pain of it, and we have a variety of reactions to it. And as I say, those reactions are natural. But it's when we nurse something, we hold it, that's where forgiveness comes in. We're letting go of the darkness that's in us. Jesus said in this prayer that God will forgive us as we forgive other people. And this is really describing a principle. God being that omniscient, omnipotent force that has gone into creating everything. And if we're holding some anger, some hurt, some resentment, some desire for revenge, then that inhibits the light from coming into us. That's what we're holding. If you think of yourself as a container, and you fill that container up with some dark liquid, and it's filled to the brim, there's no room for anything else to come in. And if that's what you're holding, then no light can come in. In order for the light to come in, you have to let go. You have to release what you're holding on to. And forgiveness is letting go. It's releasing what you've been holding on to, that things should have been different, that people should have acted differently than they did. It's not that you let go of your values. It's not that you say and are giving permission, what was done was right. But you let go of all of that that you're holding on to in order for the light to come in. And that's God gives to you as you release this. God forgives you as you forgive others. But this is automatic. That when you release it, then you allow that light to move into you and through you. And so we have to recognize when we're holding on to something past its time, when we're not letting something go. Some fear, some anger, some resentment. And that can be about anything in our lives. And it can go back to the very beginning of our lives and even beyond that. That we are holding on to things about it. And then when some situation comes like this, if we've been holding on to other things in our life, it can bring all of that up, all the anger, all the fear, all the darkness that we feel about that. And then we have to clamp down all the harder in order to hold that. in order to not release it and let it go. So in order to forgive, we have to be willing to let go. And we untie the connection. We're not giving permission. We're not saying what was done was correct. But we're letting go. The other aspect to this is that through prayer, we can pray for somebody who has done something that has caused a lot of harm for other people. And that can be a sticking point for us sometimes, because again, we tie that prayer up with thinking we're giving that person permission, or we're saying that what they did was okay. But if somebody is acting out of darkness, what is the resolution for them? The resolution is for them to be filled with light. And when we want revenge, if we were really to analyze it, when we want revenge for something, we are wanting that person to suffer. And for what reason? Because if they suffer, then in our minds we connect that if they suffer, they'll realize they created suffering for somebody else, and they'll learn from that. They'll understand that when they create suffering for somebody else, that they can't separate themselves from that. And that is wisdom. That's compassion. Anyone who has compassion can't separate themselves from another person. They feel what another person feels. They understand what that life is. Well, if we're to understand what somebody who is acting out of darkness is going through, then we see that the resolution for them is to be filled with light. And light and darkness cannot coexist. So if they're filled with light, then they cannot act in darkness. And that's really the resolution that we want for them. So when we pray for a person, let's say some of these people who planned and organized, carried out these actions that hurt an awful lot of people, that destroyed the lives of a lot of people. And we pray for them to be filled with the light. And they are filled with that light. Then they will feel the compassion, they will feel the effect of what they have created for other people. And they can no longer carry on those kinds of actions, because they can no longer separate themselves from what happens to other people. I've told all of you, I think at one time, about an experience that I had where I was taken into a previous life where I was this young boy in Stalingrad during the siege that happened there. I was just 6 years old, and my mother was dead. My father was insane. There is no food. There is no heat. Terrible conditions. And I asked God, I said, why? Here's this little boy. How come he's suffering like this? Why is this war conditions bringing about these conditions? And immediately, my mind was taken to a previous lifetime. And in that previous lifetime, I had waged war against other people. And I had created suffering for other people. And so in the balance of karma, that my soul had to go through those experiences. But it's not for nothing, it's not just punishment. Because by going through those experiences, by being on the receiving end of those activities that I had once perpetrated at another time, I felt the suffering of that. And I could no longer look at a child or innocent people who are suffering and not see myself. So through that, I learned a larger identification. I learned compassion. All of us are evolving souls. And the people who are in this room have learned many of those lessons. But there are other people in this world who have not learned those lessons. And so they can act against other people and not feel what they feel, not have that compassion, not have that understanding. But how does that come about? In my case, after the lifetime that I had where I had waged war on others and I had created suffering for others, I was lifted out of the body at the end of my lifetime. I reviewed my life, and there was this wonderful being of light who was reviewing it with me. And it was really a remarkable experience. You might say that my soul was ready to awaken on that level, but I really noticed this being of light who was reviewing this life and with me, and this being had great strength, great light, great understanding, and great compassion. All the things that I had been lacking. And as I observed this being of light, I thought, that's what I want to be. I knew I wasn't that, but that's what I wanted to be. And that was a turning point for my soul. I made a change. Because that being of light represented all of that to me. All of those qualities of strength and light and purity of purpose and compassion. Now there's nothing in that being of light that said what I did was all right. I understood that what I did was not all right. There were some things that I did that was all right. But there's many other things I felt very badly about. And as I say, I had to face the consequences of those things that I had done. So in our own interaction with these events that are unfolding all around us, I think that this template that I experienced of having a being who was all strength, all light, all compassion, those are the qualities that we want to have. That we don't say that this is all right, but we give all those qualities of light to all these people. There are people in this world whose dharma it is. President of the United States and other world leaders and people who are involved in law enforcement and military and so on, whose dharma it is to protect the country and whose dharma it is to bring people to justice, and they must act in order to fulfill their dharma. As Krishna was with Arjuna on the battlefield, must act, or the darkness is given permission to spread everywhere. But it is possible to act out of integrity, out of the light, to bring people to justice, without giving in to the darkness, without giving in to dark emotions, to be guided by wisdom and by light. And it is possible for all of us to act in exactly the same way. In fact, we're called upon to act in the same way. And if we give in to the darker emotions, if we give in to the darkness and act out of that, then we only continue on this cycle of violence that just continues to go on and on and on. So they must act in order to fulfill their dharma. But what we can do is that we can see this light filling every person involved, the leaders of countries, the people who are looking out after the protection, bringing to justice these various individuals, and the individuals themselves. And we can bring the power of that light that resides within us and seeing it pervade all of this world, because this world can react with darkness to fight the darkness, or it can react with light to fight the darkness. If darkness is used, then it promotes more darkness. If light is used, then there's an opportunity to really change this world. I've been very heartened to see the number of people who have gathered in prayer, meditation, candlelight vigils, and bringing the power of that group thought, that group energy into the world. And for people to continue to respond in that way and to bring the power of light into this world. And when that is done, then everything is fulfilled for a higher purpose, for a higher good. And so through prayer, through fulfillment of Dharma, through forgiveness and letting go, then we can reside in that light and we can bring that light to others. So if there are others who have thoughts or comments, about this.
But I've heard you say basically the same thing. I think this is like the third time. And but tonight, as you were speaking, I was given the thought. I keep after any traumatic event. That event for me has always like been frozen in the picture in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep seeing that plane just about to hit the building. That's like the picture that's stuck there.
Yes.
And what you just said, I'm unable to pray for certain things for people.
Mm-hmm.
But what you just said is brought to mind a form of prayer that it's just perfect for absolutely everything, is to just see whatever it is, whether it's an event of that magnitude or on a personal level, surrounded by light.
Yeah.
That's the prayer.
Yeah.
And then that leaves everything to
Yes.
perfect.
And surrounded in light and seeing the light shining within the hearts of everybody. Yeah. And by doing that, we bring a blessing into this moment to each one of those souls. What keeps us from doing that is we go, do I want to give something to those guys who created so much pain for others? But by bringing the light in, it's such a wonderful gift, because then that light and darkness cannot exist. And if that light grows with them, even as I reflected on my own time of this great being of light being next to me, that was not an easy time for me. But it was a transforming time, because I saw it, I got it on some really deep level. That these are the qualities that I wanted to be.
Didn't you say during one talk that great being of light was the Christ within yourself?
Yeah.
That you were judging yourself?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a nice thing to tell each time, because it adds a whole different dimension to the
Mm-hmm.
story.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, you just did. Uh-huh. Yeah. And we really know, all of us really know, when we do something that is worthy and something that really betrays the light. And we might find all kinds of reasons and rationalizations why we're doing something, but we really know. We really know. And these individuals know. They know when they go against that light within their own being. Sometimes we think of prayer as being articulate about asking for something. I don't think of prayer as changing God's mind, petitioning God to do this or that. Prayer brings us into alignment with the light. And by that we become a receiving and a transmitting station for that light. So prayer is not to change God, it's to change us. And it doesn't need to be with words. There are many times in this last year when I resided in silence that all of you and others came to my mind and were clearly in my being. And there is no prayer done with any words at all. It was just simply residing in that spirit, that purity, that Christ light, that Krishna light within me. And that was the prayer. The other element of that, and it varies for me, sometimes I see events and things outside of me, sometimes I see it all residing within me. And so it's not even like we have to send it out from ourselves many times, because the whole thing resides within us. And just by being in the light, by radiating that light, that is our prayer. And I don't think that there's any more powerful prayer than that. And then sometimes we're given words, we're given thoughts, we're given things to project out. But again, that is all us manifesting that light. And we don't even have to send it out, it just simply is radiating out from us. It is coming from our being. So it changes the definition of what prayer is. It can manifest in many ways, and if we just attune ourselves, if we go into the silence and silently attune ourselves to it, prayer can manifest in lots of different ways. And we don't even have to think about how it should manifest. It just spontaneously comes to us and through us. So it's quite intimate and quite beautiful when it comes about that way. Each day when I was at Cloud Mountain, I chanted Om Shri Ram and walked all around the circumference of the retreat center there. And as I did that, I felt in my mind that I was walking around the world and chanting, permeating it all with the vibration of that. And so why don't we chant for a little bit, and as you do that, feel the vibration of that chant go out as a healing balm. Somebody mentioned earlier today that that was better than dropping bombs, to have a healing balm. To have that healing balm go out all around this world through the vibration of the chant. And so I will chant it initially, and then if you will all respond. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo Shri Rama Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Rama Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Rama Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Rama Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Rama Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Rama Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Rama Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Rama Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Rama Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Rama Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Rama Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Rama Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Rama Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ramo. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Rama.
Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram.
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. May it be so.
David, the story where you're facing that beam of light, that implies separation from the light. But when you or we achieve oneness with God, then you and that light are one. Lover and beloved are one. And there's no more, and the judged and the judge are one. And so there's no more that
in finding our oneness with God, we can reside either in the unified field of God, or we can enter into the duality. But the difference is by entering into the duality, we never lose that connection with that sense of oneness. So in that duality, we can see the other, and yet underneath all of that is the sense of interconnectedness, a sense of oneness. And within all people, you see yourself. When I was thinking about these great masters, Babaji and others, and our relationship with them, sometimes we can think of them as being up here, and we must be like little ants or something to them. But really, they see themselves in us. And so it's not fair to them to think of them as being something way up here and that they can't identify or see themselves in us. And that was a great comfort to me when I thought about it that way. They don't look down on the rest of humanity. They see themselves in humanity. And they see people who are suffering and they would like them to come up and experience what they experience. And that's their whole intent in teaching and in being here, is to draw humanity up to experience what they have.
Why does it take so long? Why do so few souls in any given generation have someone reach the goal? Out of billions,
There's nothing inherent in us. In fact, our inheritance is that. But those tendencies continue, they're like river currents that flow through us. And those old tendencies carry us away, when we're given something as simple as keep your mind on God. Why don't we just go ahead and do that? And get right to the goal. And look at Papa. All he has told us, chant Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Ram. Took it up. Couldn't drop it. Absolutely enraptured. Why aren't all of us that way? It's because we have these cross currents in us. And we make choices. We come up against something, and instead of staying with the current of the light, we get off into the side eddies. So they are choices that we make. It's where we direct our mind. It's where, when I was in football, I had a coach who was, he had this move called a head chuck. And it's down in the lines in what they call the trenches. And when the fellow comes at you, you take your arm and you hit him really hard. You can't hit him with your fist, but you can hit him with your arm in the head. And he says it's an amazing thing. Wherever the head goes, the rest of the body follows. Can't help it. So if their head's going out to the side, suddenly they're going out to the side. And in the same way, the spotlight of our attention, wherever we point that at, the rest of us follows. So if we can, with great determination, whatever we feel inside or whatever currents comes to us from our situation, we can keep that spotlight dead on with God, then that's where we're drawn to. The rest of us follows. But being made up of mixed nature, we take some steps forward, we turn our attention over here, and then we get feeling painful over there, and we go, oh yeah, I kind of blew it here, get my attention back here. Well, doesn't that look interesting over there? And the rest of us follows over there. And, oh, what am I doing here? Let's get back on track. But if we can do that, if we can keep the mind going there, there's nothing that stops us. Nothing at all. And what karma is those built-in tendencies that we have created ourselves through our own thought process that either takes us like a laser beam to our goal, or we get distracted this way and that way, and every which way, and wherever we point at, the rest of us follows. So it's simple. We have our distractions, we have our interests. And it doesn't even mean we can't pursue life. We can pursue life. But beyond all of the other goals, or within all of the other goals, we see the ultimate goal, keeping the mind on the light. If we do that constantly, steadily, intention, purpose, we will arrive at the goal. In fact, there's no goal to arrive at. We actually are already that. It's a little bit like, if you stub your toe, suddenly your whole attention is drawn to the pain in your toe. Now, if you could back up, you could sense that the rest of your body is fine, functioning, everything is going on fine. All the attention is drawn to the toe. But there's another part of you who's fine, who's at peace, has the light. We're just not aware of it in that moment. You have that realized state in as great a measure as you will ever have it existing in you right now. And the real key is gaining that awareness. So it's not actually changing yourself. You are already that. Some of it is accepting it, but mostly it's attuning the mind to that. That we've grown into these habits of attuning our minds to all these different vibrational levels. And when we get into the habit of drawing our mind to the highest vibrational level, we can operate in all the other vibrational levels, but we do it out of attunement and alignment with that highest vibrational level. And that already exists. It's not like it needs to be created in us, but we need to make that happen. It's already there. So the whole thing is attuning our mind to it, to receiving it. The way they said it in the Bible was, as many as received him, gave he power to become the sons of God. Receiving means with your whole being you receive that light. We have all these belief systems. I'm not worthy of that. That's not me. What will happen if I really let go of my life? Maybe I'll cease to exist. Maybe I'll be a person I don't want to be. All the fears, all the resistance comes in.
And yet there's the story of Meher Baba's father, who spent his whole life in quest of God and pursued nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
And in his 40s, he had a dream that told him that what he sought in this life was not to be his.
Mm-hmm.
And so he then married and fathered children and gave the world Meher Baba.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a story. If he accepted that, then that's true.
Yeah. But each one of us have that infinite power within us. That realization. We are already that realized state. So if he accepted it, that's his test. It's a tough game. It's not easy. Things really come up. I mean, we can hear some of these stories and we go, oh, I know the answer to that one. But when it's our life and it's that particular attachment that we're dealing with, then it's not always so easy. Then we get confused and we wonder and we're up and we're down. But it's that steady, constant, reminding vision. And if we do that, it turns into a magnet. If you've ever seen something magnetized, at first it can be just a piece of metal, but it gets magnetized and suddenly it has this drawing power. And the more that we turn our attention on the divine, the more magnetic it becomes. And it builds up a power, and suddenly that's drawing us much more powerfully than anything else is. And the more we keep investing the current of our life energy into it, the stronger that magnetism comes.
So you're saying, let me see if I got this right, that Meher Baba's father was given a severe test and he flunked.
He did what he did.
But he flunked the test.
If he hadn't accepted that,
Who knows?
yes.
And if he hadn't been Meher Baba's father, someone else would have.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And is there anything from being in a realized state and being someone's father? Larry Mahasya met Babaji. He was married at the time, but he had no sons and no daughters. He had his family afterwards. And yet he came back a realized being. So I think it's unfortunate that we built up this idea in the East. It's been built up so much that being in and of the family is somehow in opposition to a spiritual life. And it's just not true. And Mother was a very big exponent of that. Ramakrishna expressed it as, it's easier to fight the war from the fortress, and the fortress is the family home. So it's time for us to really honor marriage and honor the home. And, neither one are impediment. It's just really what we do with our mind, where we turn it to. And there's all kinds of messages out there to say, yeah, I saw it at an ashram. People, there's something implicit there that you can't be as high as Papa. Papa was up there. And you really shouldn't ever imply it. It turns into heresy that if you do. You imply that anybody could be what Papa was. So it's so interesting the way it comes into the mind, and we create these boundaries, these separations. Self-realization has done that. Master is up here. Nobody could ever be what Master is. It's said overtly, it's implied, and you better not compare yourself. You better not ever think that. That turns into heresy. So all these ways of creating separation, they come in so subtly. We have to be willing to smash those idols. As Papa says, he plays football with the stars. People were talking about astrology.
God's geometry, astrology. And yet it's all Ram's doing.
It is. And that's why it's a play. It's a Leela. And ultimately, it's a challenge. It's fun. It's interesting, and it's also dramatic. It's heartbreaking. It's everything. It's all of life. But when we recognize that all of life has a divine origin and is sustained through divine intelligence, even the difficult parts take on a joyful, blissful aspect to it. Even grief has kind of a sweetness in it. And we realize that that divine life is all of life. There's nothing separate from it, but the human mind has a very difficult time accepting that. Its business is to create division and separation. This is human, this is divine. And in the beginning, we make that separation. That's wisdom. We go to the light. And we say, this is darkness over here, this is ignorance, and I'm going to the light. But once we penetrate into that light, then we see it's that light that's shining that makes everything animate and alive. And we can transform that from a belief system into realize reality. So it's not sufficient just to believe it or just to accept that notion, that idea. It's to experience it in every cell of our being and realize it and know it. We know it beyond a doubt. And that's far different than accepting an idea, saying, I think that this is true. Even if we intuitively hunch it, that's different than the fully realized experience. And that's the price that we have to pay. That is the layers that we have to go through. Resistance, that ignorance. But anybody who turns their mind onto that light, the light comes and helps them. Picks them up. So it's available to everybody. But who wants it? wants it more than the world. And that's why that's rare. Not because there's anything that's saying there's a quota system. You and you and you and nobody else. We impose it on ourselves.
Many are called, but few are chosen.
And few choose. So that's why this kind of extreme language is used. Absolute surrender, willing to die. Because it's that kind of deep, deep place that it needs to come from. We say yes. And are willing to surrender our own individual control to it all. And of course what we find is, the fear of the ego is will cease to exist. But really, if we look at some of these great spiritual personalities, the world's never known greater personalities in the world, and stronger, more dynamic, more intelligent, more feeling and compassionate. The greatest personalities in the world have been these wonderful spiritual luminaries. But the ego is sitting on the shoulder whispering, "You'll die, and disappear. You won't get what you want." So that's the test. Isn't it fun?
Not all the time. It's not. You're having more fun than anybody.
Do you have any questions, Christine?
One thought that came to me is how interesting it would be this experience in New York,
Mm-hmm.
when the terrorists and the victims all reach the other side at the same time. What happens then?
Mm-hmm. What do you think?
I don't know. It goes sorted through slots.
They have turnstiles that they all have to wait in line together with. I think each one turns inside. They look to their own lives, how they lived them. Did they do what they came to do in this life? Did they learn what they came to learn? So it's not so much a focus on the other fellow, but it's a time for reflection.
So doing what they came to do, could that be exactly what they did do to fulfill being a terrorist as part of their dharma? Is that how it works?
You would have to look into the heart of that person to see what they really felt, to see what they really believed. If they really felt what they were doing was according to their highest light. It's a stretch for me to see how somebody who produces damage and people who there's no declared war, these are just people who are going to work. They are people with families, with children, with mothers, with fathers. It's difficult for me to see how they could be living a life of Dharma and doing that. But I would hold it out as a possibility that in their mind and in their heart they saw themselves as going according to their highest nature. Maybe an easier example for me, one that I mentioned on Sunday, would be in World War II. That there could be German soldiers. You know, here's a fellow, he's pulled out of his family, he's put into the army, he's told what's right, what's wrong, he's fighting for his country, he's doing what his officers have told him to do. And that he could do that from a place of pride, a place of really thinking that he's helping his country, his family, all of that. And I could see that there could be some very high quality people shooting guns from the other side, believing that they're doing the right thing, showing bravery, all of it. And so really to do that type of analysis, you really have to look into the heart of the other person and find out what is their motivation, why are they doing this, what is their belief. But I would hold it out as a possibility that they could be doing their dharma.
As part of God's plan for the evolution of
He's using them for some purpose, and they're willing instruments.
Because it's my hope that out of this dark experience, so many changes and growth will come about. That was the catalyst to open hearts, to bring more light, to refocus the priorities of people and their country.
All of that. And when you see darkness coming into the world like that, and then the strength of the light coming up to meet it, that's a tremendous thing, and we've seen some evidence of that. People turning to the light, prayer, meditation, focused on bringing more light to the world. And so the sum total of response to that could be a great change of consciousness triggered by some act of darkness.
So my thought about that was that all these people that sacrificed their lives and the perpetrators of supposed crime were all playing out for the highest good.
Well, there again, you would have to look into their hearts to find out what was moving them in terms of looking at them as individuals from a human standpoint.
So the people that were killed within this experience, that was their dharma also, that was their heartbeats or breath?
Possibly, that's the thing that they chose for themselves. I got curious a couple days after this, how many people die every day on the earth? And so Elaine looked up in the actuary tables on the internet for Canada, for the United States, for Western countries, hovered just under 1%. And I thought, well, with Africa and some of Asia, that might be a little higher. It'd be pretty close to 1% of the world population. We've got 5 billion plus people, 5% in a year. Those who are yearly run you around 5 million or so. And what did we figure out? About 300,000 to 400,000 in that range a day.
300,000 or 400,000.
People a day exit. Excuse me. So 5,000 people that's a lot of people leaving all at once, but it's 5,000 out of 400,000 perhaps.
So that perspective makes
It does make it look different. And every day, I mean, wouldn't that be headline news? 400,000 died a day. But you don't see that because it's common, it's every day. But this is concentrated, and of course, so it takes on a different significance in our minds, and I think rightfully so. But still, when you look at it in counterbalance to this other idea of 300,000 or 400,000 people every day leaving this earth, and since we have a growing population, more than that coming in every day. Those turnstiles in the astral worlds are really zipping by. That's a lot of activity. So it does lend a little perspective that's a little bit different. And that people do come and go for a purpose. I think that's one of the things that a spiritual perspective brings to us, that life is not devoid of meaning. And most often when people are facing death, the real issue that comes up is there meaning or suffering, death or suffering? Is there meaning in this? And the thing that really, and any kind of suffering, there's all kinds of suffering in the world, but once we understand that it is filled with meaning, personal meaning to us, very pertinent to who we are, then it changes our perspective about that, about any kind of pain that we have as a result of living in this life. So I think I'm not saying necessarily consciously that people thought, oh yeah, I'm going to get on this plane today and this is my last day and this is why I came. Or I'm going to be in this building today. But on some level, the soul makes that decision. And that's where we can step back and see this all in a little different perspective. I told the story before about the TV show that I saw in the making of Gandhi. And there's a particular scene in the movie of Gandhi that was a historical incident where the British come in and they come into the square where this political demonstration is going on. There's women, children, men peacefully gathering there. The British soldiers line up, they're going to teach them a lesson, and they just start mowing them down. They just start shooting into this crowd. So they're running and scattering, and they can't go, the doors are locked, it's a closed square. It's just a shooting gallery. And it's a horrible scene in the movie, and not to mention real life. But in the making of the movie, this television show showing the making of the movie, the scene was over and somebody hollers, "Cut!" And then you see over on the side they have all these banquet tables all lined up, and everybody goes over, and here's the Indians with blood all down, and here's the British soldiers, and they're all sitting down and laughing and talking and having lunch, enjoying themselves. And I thought, what a wonderful illustration for life. And that when we leave this world and we're in the astral world, we're going, do you remember when? You know, and you were on the other side and I was on this side. And, you know, because we have a larger perspective on life, it doesn't hold the same kind of meaning for us that it does here. We understand that there's nothing absolute about this physical life. It's just an aspect of one larger life that we're living. And when we take on that larger context, it does change how we view this life and the incidents of this life. The other analogy I think of are the times when I've been on some adventure or another, and river rafting or things like that, and I'm caught in the middle of the rapids, and it's just really hard work, and it's kind of dangerous, and you're not sure what's going to happen, and you're wondering, why in the world did I sign up for this, and why am I here, and how do I get out of here, and I can't wait for this to be over. But later on, those are the stories you tell, and those are the things that you remember 20 years ago, and you forget all the good times, you know, and do you remember when we were, you know? And so suddenly, that same incident kind of takes on a glow that you didn't feel at all at the time, but it looks differently then, and it's actually the kind of thing that you focus on. So to hold that perspective, even while we're in the midst, and one third and final way of looking at things is how many times we've just worried things to death. Worry, 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 worry. What's going to happen? And of course we always imagine the worst case scenario. And how few times that's actually realized. How many times we come through something and we go, oh, I got through it. It's okay. But then we're on to the next worry. We're just, we'd love to do that. And if we can hold that larger perspective, even while we're in the midst of some activity and still able to act, doesn't inhibit us. In fact, we can act from a pure place then. And still to act, but to act with that wider perspective, that wider knowledge. How much more peace we would have, security, that knowingness, how we could act out of our higher selves rather than being reactive just to the moment. And that's what we're really called upon to do, is to remember who we are in our greater self. And far from not having compassion for other people, we really feel, it gives us the capacity to feel for other people. And still we hold this wider view, this larger view of the world. And so I think times like this really challenges us to do that. But if we can do it, we can be that beacon of light instead of joining in on the darkness, instead of becoming fear consciousness or anger consciousness or all the other kind of reactions we can get into. And we can still say, that's wrong, I don't agree with that. It's not that we're saying, oh, that's okay, or it doesn't matter, or none of that. But we want to manifest that light, we want to bring it in. So that's how we can have forgiveness and still be free to act. Does that make sense?
So as the leaders of the country are protecting America or all over the world.
Or all over the world.
It's not just about turning the other cheek again.
No. It's their responsibility. It's their dharma to protect. It's Canada's leadership to protect. Anybody can nab a plane and run it into some buildings. And that can be any building in any place in the world. Turn it into a bomb. So it's up to the leaders of countries to protect their countries. That's their job. That's their dharma. It's also their job to bring people who have broken the law to justice, just as a policeman does. So they still go about doing their job. And we can see all of them acting from the highest place of integrity, acting from a place of justice and not vengeance, using restraint instead of acting out of emotionalism, that they're able to hold what is for the highest good of everybody concerned. And they need our support in that, they're human beings. They see this happen and they feel terrible and they want to react, but that's their duty, that's their dharma, is to restrain that and to act out of a sense of justice and rightness. Measured, this is what I need to do.
By all of us seeing that light within
We strengthen that light.
the strength in that. And that's what we can all contribute.
Yes. Yes. And even without any words, just by residing in that light yourself, and then if they come to mind, or if you hold them in mind, that too is a prayer. You're giving the power of light within you to them. It's transmitted through this inner net that binds all of us together. It connects us all. And there's peace in that. You feel peace, you feel freedom, you feel light. And if people react with fear and anger and vengeance and darkness, then that's what's brought into the fray. But when we respond with light and strength and purpose, then we bring that to the world, to ourselves and collectively. And that's what we're needing right now. And none of that stops us from acting and protecting and bringing to justice and all of that.
The message is this is not over there.
You know, Krishna loved the Kauravas and the Pandavas, and the Kauravas were the ones who were on the other side. He loved them. But he also knew that the battle needed to take place, and he also knew for the light to exist and to grow, the Pandavas had to win. So to hold in your heart, this is God too. These are God beings also. But we still need to act for the higher good of everybody.
Look, the Vedic stories are very myself.
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah.
that-
And it's a story of action. So from that standpoint, for Westerners, it's really perfect because it is a story of action. Very practical. Every day we enter into the field. Every day. How do we hold ourselves while we're on the field? And that's what it speaks to. Also speaks to, sometimes I just want to retire to a cave, but it says, can't do it. As long as you breathe, as long as you eat, as long as you move, you are in action. And you need to recognize that. And you are a person of action.
So with Krishna as my sword, the battle is already
It's already won.
won.
All we have to do is keep our mind on him. He's the charioteer. And victory is assured. Yes?
I don't have any questions.
True? Keep your mind on the highest and you'll always be pulled through everything else. Isn't it nice to be together again? Even George missed me.
Yeah, I was a little angry at you for a while.
Yeah,
But
it's
not
natural.
angry, no, that's not the wrong word. I
Hmm.
was just upset that you weren't going to be around.
Yeah.
I thought angry was a good word.
Yeah.
Somebody said to Ramana Maharshi one time, he said, but when you die, you know, and you're not here anymore, and Ramana Maharshi says, well, where am I going to go? Many times, every day, it came to mind. And my feeling there was that there is no separation.
Yeah, I thought about you a lot too.
Anytime I think about Anandashram, I just think about Swamiji and I think about being in his room and I feel like I'm there, even this moment. as we purify the mind, it becomes more and more that way. And then we feel like that there's no space, really, not even time. We feel that the mind merges into whatever we put our attention on. Jenny was talking about the moment of the impact of that, just before that. And the feeling of just entering into all of those souls who must have been terrified. Whether they knew they were going to run into a building or not, they knew bad things were going on. And just to see that flame of peace burning in them, each one of them.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it. I haven't thought about it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just before turning it all into white light
Mm-hmm.
and not seeing the explosion
Mm-hmm.
change the whole thing.
Yeah. Changes us,
Good way to look at it.
and it changes them.
It makes it a little bit easier
Mm-hmm.
to take.
If you've ever thought about a time that you've been in a world of hurt for some reason, you're on the edge, you're in a dangerous situation, and suddenly you get very, very calm. And you're not even sure why, but you get really calm and you just know exactly what to do and you just go about doing it. Who knows that we're not the product of some great master or somebody's prayer who's focused on us, who's giving us additional strength in that moment. And that we have the capacity to give that gift to others through our prayer, just by residing in the light. Not even necessarily by doing anything other than feeling that strength inside of ourselves and having that as a natural outpouring of who we are. When I was up by Babaji's cave at Dwarahut, I felt these, it's up about 1 o'clock in the morning. It was so beautiful, full moon out with 2 planets on either side. I thought of the moon as the ajna, Christ center, and the 2 planets on either side as the 2 eyes. Just spectacular, and you've been up there at those heights and how clear the stars are, how crystal clear they are. And these vibrational waves were just coming down through the valley. They just came down like a gust of breeze will come up, and you'll feel it if you're in a ravine someplace, and then it just suddenly dies out. And it was like that, and it's just wave after wave. And I had the distinct feeling that these were the products of some great yogis emanating out, these powerful vibrations coming out. And in truth, we all have that same capacity. As we expand our minds, as we expand our souls and attune it with that light, the more we do that, the more we have that capacity to give that as a gift to the world. I thought, isn't it interesting? Here's this very remote part of India, high up in the mountains, and here they're emanating out vibrations that go out and affect the whole world. It's wonderful. It's quite wonderful. And in my own small way, that was a template, that was a pattern for me at Cloud Mountain, to make myself available for whatever might manifest and move through me. And that we all are, that we're all a receiving station and a transmitting station. It's quite remarkable.
Well, it kind of left me with a sense of having to do it on my own because you weren't around.
Uh-huh.
So, and yet you were. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it strengthens us, you know. And we might fall down on our nose a couple times. But we learn from that too, but overall it gives us a greater sense of strength. Anytime that on the inner planes I've connected with any of these spiritual masters who, with body or without a body, my overall sense coming away from that is that they are very concerned with us and that they are always looking to help us. But we are very rarely aware of it. We feel ourselves to be alone, isolated, but that they are always with us. They're concerned about us. They want our highest good.
Something like New York, that colony there, made me feel quite vulnerable. A lot of fear in there. Like, if that can happen, where it happened, it just left me in a state of vulnerability. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fear.
Yeah.
But time heals that.
It does, and it can also shake our reliance that this material world offers us real safety or security in a way that is really an illusion. It doesn't as much as it's familiar, and things, if I put this cup here, it tends to stay here. It doesn't fly up or disappear or go, So it gives me a sense of stability and security that's there. But all of that can go away from us at any particular point. And when it was interesting to me to kind of step back from it and look at it, that what were destroyed were these financial institutions, huge buildings that represent financial institutions that represent our reliance on man-made things, including financial institutions and the stock market and all of those things that we have created. And that the instinctive response to people isn't to run to banks and say, oh, thank God the bank's still here. They gather in churches, they gather in town squares and light candles, and it's a moment of prayer and upliftment, and the mind turns from the man-created things to the divine. And that's our instinct when things get shaken on the human level, that we turn to the divine. And I think that's a tremendously hopeful thing, a shift of consciousness. And if it's something that we can sustain, if it's something that actually turns people's minds, they say, there isn't anything absolute about financial institutions or about large buildings or about our lives even as humans. So where do I find that stability? Where do I rely upon? And when we turn that inward, then I think we realign our lives in a new way that is really beneficial to many, many people. And that's a way to turn something like this into something that's beneficial. The other kind of end of the continuum of that is to become afraid and to become totally focused on our frailty and that nothing in life is secure, and that fear takes us over. We build a bomb shelter and move into it and never come out of it. That's the other direction we could go. That would be way on the other end of the continuum.
You see a lot of people turning that way into to God and
Yeah.
really see that.
Yeah. And there's tension there. Other people are turning to the human, well, got to protect my neighborhood, and so, and giving allowance that we do need protection and all that kind of thing, but where does our real reliance go to? And I'm very hopeful for what I'm seeing in terms of people, and even in the news media that usually ridicules anything of religion or prayer. They're carrying that, and very respectfully so. And so it's something that can be very good that can come out of all of this.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I find comforting all the time is that Papa said the world is perfect exactly as it is.
Yeah. And he oftentimes made the point that the darker things got, the more it voted for the light to come forward. That's the response, and people respond that way. Whatever people's political affiliation or philosophical affiliation, those people who are aligned with the light, they start zooming into the light. And the millions of good Muslim people who live in Canada and the United States, they're saying, that's not us. That's not us. I may not even like all of the United States policy, but that's not us. And that's really people who are aligned with light, rejecting the darkness.
Right.
And there's value in that too. So our job is to stay aligned with the light, and then collectively to take action, but to take judicious action. But to stay aligned with the light and not give in to. It's not an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's not hatred for hatred.
No, it can't work that way.
No. You just generate more hatred. But it also does not stop you from carrying out justice. Saying, no, this cannot continue. So my prayer is that the leaders primarily, but also the general population, not give in to prejudice, not give in to hatred, not give in to darkness, but to rise up in light. And we could see a wonderful regeneration in this world. People turning from apathy and indifference to really questioning their priorities in life. I talked to my parents, and they had planned to come over for some sporting events to Seattle. They were all canceled. So they went to church. First time in quite a while, because it's sports season, right? They said, man, it's just packed. So it's wonderful to see people's, that's their instinctive reaction. It's to turn that way. And who knows, it may be a blip on the screen, but it also may represent a turning.
Yeah, Christine and I were just talking about that. The whole continent starts to change.
Yeah.
To a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
Laura Bush talked about that today. Maybe this would be time to really focus on the priorities in life. She says that, what's just happened, things like road rage are pretty petty.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity for, she was speaking in America, to really make some new choices about how they want the country to go.
Wonderful. Yeah. That's the message that needs to go out.
She was primarily focused on talking to children about what has happened, and communicate with them to relieve their fear.
Mhm.
And let them know that this was an isolated incident. Because I guess a lot of parents have given their children too much TV exposure.
And you know, this, I oftentimes reflect on the story of the Buddha, and that he, in his life in the first 21 years or so, was oblivious to death. And suddenly he encounters it when he's out on a ride one day. And he sees, this is the ultimate outcome for everybody. To me, it's a metaphor that most of us block the idea of death. We don't really, we kind of know it's there, we know it happens to people, but we really don't take it in that this is a temporary residence and we're going to give it up one day. But something in life comes along and it puts it right in front of us in a way that we can't avoid it. Somebody close to us dies, or we have some kind of event in our body that is a near-death kind of thing, or something like that nature. Or collectively, we see this happen, a large event like this. And death is put into our face, and it shakes our reliance on this physical reality. And what it did for the Buddha is it sent him off on a path. He says, well, if all life ends up like this, what's the use? And so his whole thing in life became, I got to find an answer for this, because this is not acceptable. This is not okay. And if we can encounter something like this, and here it shakes our clinging to this physical reality, and we say, I've got to find the answer here. I've got to find out what the truth is. Because really, I could be going to work one day. A very strange thing happened to, I think many of you met Marge Ranney. And her parents, one Sunday morning, were at home. And this bizarre thing happened. This engine fell off of an airplane and fell on her house and killed her father.
So home isn't all that safe.
That's going to shake your clinging to the body. Where can you hide? Anything can happen. Anything can happen. But these kind of wake-up calls come. They really shake our clinging. We grow complacent and reliant, and we kind of think of, well, this body is around forever, and the reality is it isn't. It's a temporary residence. Maybe we have 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years, but sometime we're going to exit. And to force that, let that question us, for us to question, where does my reality come from? Where do I get solidity from? What is the truth here? I want to know what the truth is. Not just be sold an idea or a bill of goods. I need to know the truth. So something like this can really shake people. They're clinging to the bottom.